A Voice Coming From Then starts from Jeremy's teenage suicide attempt and expands to encompass themes of bullying, queerphobia, acceptance and support. It includes unexpected typography, collage, humour, magic, discotheques, and frequent appearances from the Victorian demon Spring-Heeled Jack. So, as I said, we are going to be sharing the screens. Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, Jeremy, over to you.
Oh, thanks, Cherry. And thanks for all the work you've done putting this together and for running this little reading single-handedly, because I know what it's like to try and do everything. Yes, so A Voice Coming From Then. I thought I'd give you a little background as to what inspired the book, with a content warning that the explanation contains details of my suicide attempt. So on Wednesday, 13th of June, 1979, 3 months after my 15th birthday, I waited until Dad drove Mum into Cardiff for her night shift as a staff nurse, then went into the kitchen and stole the tablets she stored under the sink. After taking them, I fell asleep on the sofa in my bedroom. I woke up suddenly at about 2 a.m. and proceeded to vomit for the next 6 hours, which is probably why I'm still here today. A Voice Coming From Then is about the effect of that night on the whole of my life. The poems I'm going to read tonight are not those ones in the book which deal with specific themes of suicide. Okay, so Cherry can go to the first poem. This poem is really a tribute to one of my favorite poets. It's called Race. So this is a poem where I meet Anne Sexton when I am 3 years old and lost. I am 3 years old and lost, and she grabs me in the foyer of the Royal Festival Hall in London. Anne Sexton grabbing me when I run away from my mother in the foyer of the Royal Festival Hall. And I run straight into the sheer legs of Anne Sexton. Talking to men, a circle of men around her, I run straight into her legs and she laughs. Drops down level with my face and laughs. Picks me up and swings me on her hips, swaying on Anne Sexton's hips as she strides the foyer of the Royal Festival Hall, looking for a mother and recognizing my mother by reading the fear in an unfamiliar face. Reads my mother with a smile, handing me over with a smile and a slight tap on my mother's stomach, her tapping and saying, "Let's hope this one's a girl." A girl and a slight tap and a cigarette walking away. Anne Sexton walking back to the men and my mother, staring and recognizing that smile on a spotlit poster, a poster for poetry in the foyer of the Royal Festival Hall. So this is a poem where I meet Anne Sexton in London when I'm 3 years old, when we are both unmourned. So this is a poem about secondary school. Buddies, you're playing choke games at lunchtime, holding your breath with Tim behind, hugging your chest until you slump to the floor. Someone says your mouth was twitching. The one out longest should be unbeatable. We surround you at the top of the quad's concrete steps, the safety of home, one push away. This is kind of another poem slightly inspired by school and school games. Includes one profanity towards the end. Sidelines. Men terrify me. What they shout, what they chew, how they spit. Every petty alliance kicking into touch. Those motherfucking hugs. Next poem's about my time studying in Stoke-on-Trent in the 1980s, when the world kind of opened up a bit more for me. This is called Student Union Disco. He would leap up to Windmill, to Blue Monday, do thigh slaps in time only to realize too late it was actually love reaction by Divine, the same slow build-up, that snare so similar it was hard to tell, a homage you could call it, being generous. So he stops in his tracks, hesitant of the dance, like bumping into each other after closing on College Road, invited in for tea and toast, just sitting there, staring at his Lloyd Cole quiff, unsure of what music was playing. And this is the last poem we're going to be reading in this first half. It's about a very specific place in Cardiff on the Hayes, or really, rather I should say under the Hayes. And if you know that area, you'll know what I'm talking about. Gentlemen, Dunyon, 17 urinals in a row underground. You're counting them twice while a lad notices, whistles softly through this gift to Cardiff men since 1898. Glass bricks above dropping light. Marble wings obscure each shuffling space. The floor is damp, slippery. You're always following someone's shining footprints. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. In How Exile is her debut poetry collection, published by Seren, inspired by the many stories she heard as a child and visiting family in Iraq as an adult. Amir has written a book that celebrates the resilience of her forebears and extended family in Baghdad and around the world. The book presents a range of characters in a mixture of political and personal poems, ordinary people living in extraordinary circumstances. Formally diverse, using both traditional and experimental methods, these poems are also full of empathy and suffused with a quiet, persistent faith.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Sherry, for organising this, and thank you to Literature Wales as well for shortlisting the book. I'm really so thrilled. Thank you. As Sherry said, and as the bio said, In Hail Exile is about family in Iraq mainly. And so the first poem I'm going to read is called The Read Flute and Die. And that is kind of a summary of the book really for me. So The Read Flute and Die, after Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. As the reed flute sings, you weep your sorrow. Your heart still beats in the place you left. The weight of your yesterdays that were once tomorrows halves you, just like the day the reed was cut. pulled from its bed, carved to carry the breath of the carver, to ears held far. Its inhale is your exhale, as if straight from your own chest. Its wails redden your eyes. Its larynx speaks your exile. The same parting that split the reed from its bed brings you together, and you can't know until you've always known. When they said farewell, you bled so long, knowing you would not farewell, and still only long for the place your heart comes from. Reading in tongues, all music yearns for home. So this, the next poem I'm going to read is The Student. And my dad wants to remain anonymous. So this isn't about my dad, but it explains a lot of how I ended up here in the UK. The Student. 15 now, he flies kites with combat strings of powdered glass to secure victory over Najaf rooftops. He breeds bulbuls, swims in a caustic soda pool, runs through cemeteries to be chased by rabid dogs. Thrill seeker with the zeal of youth, pompadour hair, swagger like James Dean, he's a rebel without a cause until the cause finds him in 1963, a massacre he writes about in his school essay. His bloodline might have ended then in a pool of blood, but for a teacher risking his own bloodline by not informing on the student traitor. Returns the essay, see me after class. A quiet word with the boy's father of the hot acid their Iraqi Jimmy might land them in. For all their sakes, he's told to keep his head down a few more years. Soon enough, he'll leave Iraq, study pharmacy, listen to Engelbert Humperdinck, Tom Jones, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali. He'll hitchhike across Ireland with a friend from Hong Kong, sing Quando, Quando, Quando in a Bradford pub, work in a dairy in Halifax, drinking all the gold top he can, and learn very quickly never to give his real name. Photography is one of my favorite things, especially portrait photography. And it's the painting of light, painting with light. And I wondered how you can paint with light when there's very little light. So this is referring to the photographer in Halabja, 17th of March, 1988. And Halabja was actually had a chemical attack. Saddam had kind of gassed basically the Kurds of that area. Photographer in Halabja, 17th of March, 1988. He shoots everything he sees before him. Families gathered in alleyways, birds fallen from their nests, that day in spring. In front of steps, the figure of a man rests, wearing Kurdish turban and baggy pants, a large sash wrapped around his waist, face down in the dirt, holding a baby in his arms. Muted earthy tones around a pink blanket, a white glowing face, chin up to the sky. The photographer holds the camera tight to capture this perfect still life of the just dead. Hands shake as he takes the parting shot, newborn face towards the camera. This exposure burns his right index finger, his retina. He'll share what the world needs to see, though no image can show the pungent air, thick with sweet apple and bile. No shadow dark enough. Thank you. That's the poems for this half. Thank you very much.
No shadow dark enough. Wow. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Abir. Okay, so next up we have Angela Gardner. All right. I'm going to let you explain the book, Angela.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think I will not make as good a job of it as you will.
The book that I wrote recently, The Storytale, the Minionette, tells the story of my great-grandmother's cousin, Richard Parker, who is a cabin boy. And it's a personal and human story of one of the most important legal judgments in English law, that necessity is not a defense for murder. So the yacht, the Minionette, owned by a rich colonial barrister and politician, sailed from Southampton in 1884, headed for Sydney with a crew of 4. So the captain, the mate, the able seaman, and the cabin boy, Richard. And it foundered in the South Atlantic, about as far from land as you can get. And after 19 days, with no sight of any other vessel to rescue them, and with all 4 of them in a terrible state, the captain and the mate decided to murder and eat poor Richard. So trigger warning, I'm not actually going to read any of the bits with the shipwreck or the murder or its aftermath. It's a very large book, and so this is just to give you a taste, pardon the pun. All started well. So 17-year-old Richard waves goodbye to his cousin Sarah. That's my great-grandmother. And that's when the poems start. Okay. All hands on deck salute the adventurous day. How the sails do flap and fill with wind, washing day sheets to answer the wave given by her pale handkerchief. Boy Parker at 8 bells. And at watch, 8 bells, lashed dark and a weather sea from the slop edge. On deck, everything reflects the swaying moon. The lamps, sea light, night, all boys trim incantation, and the bells roar clouded. Salt bustles the breeze, the captain polishes intervals to starboard, rigging dream-soaked on sharp heat. Wind tosses the smooth collapse, bow wave, wind skittish, darker brilliance, and at tarry hammock's prow. The gentle dark under doldrums drift and tropic night. We wake charmed to sea glass, clear knife of waves, energies and water. Our tang of bright briny as she floats on sunlight, running before the storm. The next poem. Clouds gather thick upon us, and the wind it sings astern. The storm is a restless tumult, a darkness formed in hell. A dreadful roaring comes by fits, it beats the light from heaven. There's nothing for to comfort us, and nothing left of hope. Troubled and overmastered, it loathsomely affects its powers, a sickness insufferable of the body, as our senses storm the mind. The world turns black upon us, by horror and fear overrun. Our ears are laid open with cries that works upon each one. After the shipwreck, the Minionette, the men menaced by sharks managed to get into a flimsy rowing boat, but they had just 2 small tins of turnips and no drinking water. Adrift, we lay down in a delirium and dream of rescue. Over me, tides and currents of a dream Atlantic, somewhere between St. Helena and Tristan da Cunha. Sleepless, I wake, and the wind is sung with songs I dare not fathom. Poor misfortune. As if St. Helena Island was set adrift, and scoured alive we sail assault. Come, my sleepless boat. Derelict, we dare the ocean, them mermaids being in dreams, in Atlantic songs, delirium, cold, its skin 1,000 terrors, and we a dead weight. What poor misfortune, to hope a ship will come. Oh, from somewhere we dream our souls awake, and they a speck in seas below. And as ocean mountains marked, we trust upon God's chart, waiting for a morning to break, to see the remarkable coast. On the 18th day, after 7 days without food and 5 without water, the captain and the mate spoke to Ned, the able seaman, suggesting they murder Richard, but he refused. Richard was already delirious from drinking seawater, and in his mind he had returned home. Richard is on the trout path, water lazy into the wind, rippling and watery places sleepwalk the body, a forest mirrored, water, birds, sky, flowers. Drink it, half in the world and half not. Beneath the faithful boat there is death and early windfalls, water, not wild flowers ragged, his summer step, the nothing of shadow. Sky beside clouds, this upstream world, river, heaven, and the bugle that will meet the half-jewel spread in tumbling waters beside bruised hedgerows. Richard rises, music sending him home over the meadows. In meadows and ruined gardens. Water mirrored with light, dark-haired and dark-eyed through the watercress beds, Richard and Sarah. Crows in white chalk fields, spider silk and flowers, no path or milestones where dragonflies jewel the stream. Trout in the middle of the day drink the river, ripples into diamonds over their gills, upstream in cool refreshment. Weather moves through the meadow over Richard and Sarah, beside bugle and lady's bedstraw. It swims over trout, at rest in the shade. Their diminishing shadows, the migrant birds rise to the sky, never to return. Afloat in the water lilies, in meadows and ruined gardens, Richard and Sarah breathe the weightless air. Wind lifts above the water, stained glass shines in the river as the moon sings to the forest of hop flowers and apple boughs. Ship story. Come away, lad, strange storms and fearful days, a slow hunger home shore the blood. Captain, captain, the storm wave by which you sank 4 good lives are specks, as she tossed and rose the never. Days wrecked, days since Minionette, forgive me, foundered went. The sailors sail alone, the sailors sea and sun. Alas for Atlantic men, when weather is so thirsty. Crew must will limbs and fearful sharks surround. Between his hunger, the poor ill-fated boy, starving, mad, alone, their will be done, they kill. The boat, smaller now, an open grave, pierced he lay, death and ocean terrible for all. God then, but slowly tell the poor boy's story. This open lad, a poor slashed death, captain of the in-between. What sufferings laid the lad in such a ravenous way? The sailors owe, his limbs at last they bless.
Okay, thank you very much. No questions so far. Anybody got any questions? Speak now.
I'd like to know from Jeremy how letterpress and collage have influenced his writing.
Hi, Angela. It's very interesting. We've got very similar interests. And for me, I have a background in graphic design and making books and working with the book arts as an artist's book, so that the book is an art object in itself. And I wanted to try and bring some of that practice into my poetry, because I found the book arts has been very supportive of my poetry. In fact, some of the first readings from A Voice Comes From Then I gave at book fairs, because they had the slots open to read about work in progress. So for me, the letterpress and the kind of collage is a reflection of that interest, but I also use them in a book because I feel that they're like poems in themselves. They're visual poems, and I find that I wanted to break up the pure text of the poems with some visual work that responded to the poems, but also gave the reader a kind of breather from that. And it also meant I was able to get Rachel from Semple Press, who is the most amazing letterpress printer and book artist, to work on the letterpress for the cover and for inside the book. So for me, it is the book, the content of the book, both in terms of poetry and the visual element, are very personal to me, but I feel that they're still part of a whole. So that's why I wanted to include them, and that's why I'm very lucky that I've got an editor like Cherry that let me. You know, I said, oh, I want to put some photographs in, I want to put some blah. She goes, yes, that's fine. So, you know, I'm very lucky to Arachne for allowing that, really.
From Catrice, Jeremy, was it cathartic to write this book and share about such an important and significant time in your life, or did this project impart an element of completion?
Yes, it was cathartic. In a sense, it wasn't cathartic writing the poems. I found it quite difficult because I thought they had to be as accurate to me as possible. So it meant a lot of research and actually, you know, finding out what was on the television on the night that I attempted the suicide, and getting old copies of Radio Times and watching the actual programs, because you can on YouTube. So that, but I felt I had to be really true to my younger self. So I had to kind of read and look and study all that. So it's almost a kind of element of researching myself, which I found very hard. But now that the book's complete, it's almost, it's not separate to me, but I feel something's been resolved, and it's probably, I've had, you know, this length of time to look back on it and to understand what was going on, and it's a completion of that part. It's not the completion of how the effects on my life, but it's kind of a completion of being scared to look at it, scared to study of it, and now it's kind of like wanting to acknowledge and help other people through their creativity to deal with those kind of things in the same way. It's a strange feeling. I don't know if that answers the question.
Okay,
Am I allowed to ask another question? Because I've got a question
on.
for a beer if I'm given a chance. I noticed you were using Rumi, the poet, as a touchstone, and I just wanted you to talk a bit more about that, because Rumi is one of those poets who I really, really admire.
Right, Rumi, good question. Rumi actually, his poems were in Farsi, which is not the same language. So yeah, Iraq, they speak Arabic, but Iran and like Persia is they tend to speak Farsi, and Rumi has become quite popular. I think he's the best-selling poet for America or something at the moment. His translation, the most common one, is by Coleman Barks. It's not always accurate to the language of to the original kind of Farsi, but it renders it quite well, I think. I've been told. That poem actually, the poem that I'm kind of responding to is, it's the actual first poem in his magnum opus, which was the Masnavi. The Masnavi of Rumi was considered to be like kind of a summary of his commentary upon the Quran, actually, because he was an Islamic scholar. as well as a kind of leader of the Sufi path later. So it talks about the reed flute and the reed bed, and there's many layers of that poem that kind of resonated with me. So that's the one I respond to.
It was a lovely poem.
Oh,
Your poem.
Thank you so
not,
much.
Not just the Rumi.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So
can I pick up on that actually and ask all of you about influences? Angela, would you like to go first?
Yeah. The book is a verse novel, and so it's got I wanted to, and it's set in Victorian times with a very sort of dark Gothic tale, really. It's true crime, but what I found myself reading quite a bit was Charles Dickens novels for the language, and also definitely I was looking also at Dylan Thomas and Child's Christmas in Wales, and also Under Milkwood as well, because the writing of it, I knew that I needed to have not just poems but dialogue. So I didn't do any of the dialogue today because it's better with multiple voices. But yeah, that they were the main influences. Though I spent quite a long time doing the research. I got a grant to do some travel and to go places to find things out. So I spent quite a long time traveling and looking at things, which I was very lucky to do. So yeah, that's it.
It's extraordinary that you're actually related to one of these people, because I'd always
I
assumed this was an apocryphal story, and then it turns out it's not.
No.
It's in the law books.
No, there was something in the newspaper when I was about 15, and rather than kind of me read it in the newspaper, my mum said, "Oh, I think we'd better tell you that my grandmother, her cousin, was not just shipwrecked, but then murdered and then eaten." So it was kind of like, hold on. It was pretty wild.
Yeah. Okay. Abir, did you have anything else you wanted to say about influences?
Well, I dedicated the book originally to the keepers of the stories. Kind of grew up with them, grew up with lots of stories about different family, extended family, and it just makes its way into conversation as well. So there's like a mix of Arabic and English as well. I was the first one probably of my generation to coin Arabish, which is a different language. Just joining words together, and I hope that some of it is kind of reflected in the poems, that there's many aspects of my background. There's so many Iraqi members of the diaspora, in Cardiff and elsewhere. They were kind of like a surrogate family for myself and my siblings. And just hearing about how they ended up leaving Iraq, those stories, they don't need fiction. It's just they're enough of an influence just hearing about them. So I put them in poetry form. I hope that answers the question.
It does indeed. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Jeremy, influences?
Yes.
Apart from Anne Sexton.
Yeah, well, I suppose the two main poetic influences would be Tom Gunn, whose book, The Man with Night Sweats. The latter half of that is a series of poems about the AIDS crisis in San Francisco from different points of view about different people. But it's kind of, so there's a kind of like a thematic aspect to that part of the book, which made me kind of think about, having a whole theme throughout the poem throughout the book. And then also C.A. Conrad, who's an amazing American poet, who has lots of rituals and poetic rituals called semantic poetry, where it's about, poetry has to be about the now. So you put yourself into these kind of routines and rituals to try and free up the moment and get different creative processes going. So I didn't repeat any of their rituals, but I had some of my own, like I say, doing lots of research, or listening to one record over and over and over again to try and respond and to get back into that history of myself and how I would have originally responded to it. So those kind of influences, but also just the same, lots of books you read, contemporary poets, there's going to be traces of that as well. Or just as, you know, just reading a poem or a book and go, yes, that's great, that person's followed their vision, that is an influence on me.
Okay, thank you very much. So Catrice has another question for a beer, which I think you've partially answered, but it's quite detailed, so there might be something more you want to say. So she says, your poems are interesting vignettes, poignant, astute musings on the lives and inner workings of people, with significant commentary on the individual as well as the greater society in context of that subject's life. Where does your inspiration originate? Do you observe people keenly and these stories are born? Do you channel this clarity as you observe society? Truly interested in how you are inspired. I mean, you could take about a week answering that, but
good
have
question.
A go.
Gosh, I think I probably, you might have noticed that most of the poems are actually in third person rather than first person, because they are about the people, members of family, but also I kind of imagine myself in those scenarios as well, but there has to be a certain distance, because firstly, I'm not those people, and secondly, actually the poems were really hard. Some of them were really difficult to research, and I kind of needed I don't write every day. I know a lot of writers say that you should, but I found that I couldn't do that every day. So I guess it's like, okay, this is random, but if you've ever watched Ghost, if you've seen the film Ghost, where is it Wanda May? And I can't remember what the name of Patrick Swayze's character was, but whenever, like, Wanda May was the like the person, the medium for the seance, and Otome, okay, sorry. Yeah, but so whenever she used to kind of allow or Patrick Swayze's character used to kind of enter into her, and then he was a ghost, and then he used to enter into her, and then she'd kind of like channel his voice, and then he'd leave and she'd be like really worn out. So it feels a bit like that, in terms of kind of really imagining how like that moment or that scenario would feel to that person, and then because I might know the details about it, or they might have told me themselves about how they felt, and I just put that down. Really, I don't know if that made any sense at all. I hope it did. Yeah, great.
Brilliant, thank you. For the second half, we'll be reading in reverse order, so we'll start with Angela. So, see you very shortly.
Okay, so the Storytale of the Minionette, I was interested in exploring the uneven power dynamic between the captain and the cabin boy, the rich colonial ship's owner and the captain himself, the British government and a group of shipwrecked sailors. Also their individual motives. So why the mate went along with the plan, but the able seaman would not. Survivor guilt and self-justification, and the difference between the judiciary as an arm of the British state and divine retribution. Days after the murder and the eating of Richard, the remaining sailors were rescued and returned to face justice. The original trial at Exeter Assize was moved to the Old Bailey due to the huge public interest and the need to clarify the Empire's maritime legal framework regarding the common practice known as the law of the sea. The trials were a media sensation with coverage in newspapers from America to the South Pacific, and some happily cashed in on that with exhibitions held of the rowing boat, which people flocked to so that they could see how small it was and to see for themselves the bloodstains. This is the old curiosity shop. John Burton at your service, purveyor of curios and curiosities from all across the globe. Here at the top of Falmouth High Street, I have some scrimshaw work on whalebone, the usual unicorn horn displayed in a vitrine, sailing ships in bottles, shells and beadwork, and an orator's chair from Cannibal Islands. I have Delft shoes, glazed hats and round jackets, embroidered waistcoats and some salty tails, string work, anchors and iron rings, jade ornaments, red and black lacquer work, a telescope, sundry teapots and silk kimonos, spice boxes, novelty tobacco pipes, a mounted elephant skull, a papier-mâché carnival mask, an exquisite collection of South American moths. The town is behind the men, the whole country sympathizes. This is the perfect moment to make my name and bring in business. For I have a handsome set of antlers, a complete set of Chinese finger guards, a lady's traveling case. What else? Let me see. A gilded birdcage, an ostrich egg, a stuffed dodo, a diving helmet, a complete human skeleton. We ask no questions. Some hammered silver coins and a painted fan. In short, my emporium attracts all the skiff-scaff objects the riff-raff merchant sailors bring me. The mark of Cain. Did it amount to murder? Here where Judge Jeffreys conducted his bloody assizes, the scaffold there outside the court. Captain Dudley rushes from the morning's mail train, no more than a glimpse of the cathedral down Broadgate. Exhibitors at the Apple Fair packing up in Lower Market. On the list, Sarah Lee for feloniously slaying Francis Lee. Joseph Jasper Richards, alias Joseph Richard Jasper, for bigamy. John Bray for burglarously breaking into a dwelling house and a slaying at sea. Mr. Collins for the defence. Their lips were black and dry, their tongues were hard as stone. Horrible as the repast was, disgusting as the food was, this act was a necessity. It saved lives. Richard Parker lay there dying. These men had wives and families, and but for his sacrifice, they would have all died. The jury foreman delivers a special verdict. More than of life, or chance, or the fourth day, or of the four, I thought instead of the knife to my throat, if I were the one. Body and blood, if someone must feed the men. He was just a boy. A lurid tale. A lurid tale, my lord, and upon the tenderest flesh. It is on everyone's lips. Yet when he came to it, one of the sailors realized he just couldn't stomach it. But such a juicy story of the captain and the mate. Every newspaper relishing sinking their teeth into the meat of such a scandal. Cannibal Tom in Sydney. For his charges and pains in the tragedy, Cannibal Tom, his feet on dry land, works as a chandler, has shelves of halyards and hoists, rowlocks and rudders, plain sails through stanchions and swivels, rigging pins and mast fittings, the wind still at his back, the harbour at his window. Sailors come in for their transom pintles and gudgeons, for blocks and jammers and lacing eyes, sea cocks and furling gear, his inventory of tangs and tins of tar, of cordage and netting. He sells them Blue skies and fair weather, trade winds and calm seas. From the safe harbour of his chandlery, among splicing tools and shackles, here his winch handle to lift you from the ocean, the necessary storm covers and the shrouds. Don't press him about the shipwreck or the endless days adrift, but ask gently. He will demonstrate the correct use of bailers. He was also a yacht builder, so this one's the tenderest flesh. Alone in the hot night air, Tom Dudley stands in scented curls of wood shavings under the ribs of the new-built volunteer. What could have been? That old country turning away under dark clouds. But how many mansions in my father's house? The streets running with rain, the figs noisy with bats. The children are asleep in their beds, candlelight flickers at their windows. His flesh and bone, their young skin pale as milk. In the shadows, Philippa Dudley watches the man who returned home. All of the survivors were haunted, none of them more so than Ned Brooks, who refused to be part of the murder, but did consume some of the murdered boy's flesh, knowing that otherwise he would die. The second part of this last poem tonight is in the voice of Ned himself. And Ned Brooks joined a fair as the man who ate human flesh, or the cannibal of the high seas. He lives a sea creature trapped behind glass, waiting to be lifted out into the coruscating air. Was that singing? The pianola roll playing to itself? Ned Brooks is lost in the body of something that swallowed him years ago. He's working the charter and the goose fairs, the horse fairs and the mops, competing for attention with Madame Electra between the waxworks and steam-driven carnival rides. He's in the freak show, beside the menageries and circuses, travelling to wakes, lost in the crowds of pleasure seekers on roundabouts and gallopers who gawp at contortionists and are love-struck by mermaids, the illusionists and tricksters. He watches people trade their dull lives in factories for sensation on the switchback and terror on the ghost train. At night, after the revellers leave, I walk the unbearable field, pleading for refuge. I am not in control of this dream. It is in control of me. The open ground around me is calm, dark sea as I step over pegged ropes and canvas flaps. He is here waiting, propped in the boat between water and sky. I would run away if I could, but he always follows. The futility of a locked door against this intruder. The wife has left, but the neighbours still complain. I cry out. We are all still shipwrecked. No rescue. It goes on and on. There is no closing his flesh. His eyes are inside my body, trying to break me open.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I told you it was a bit dark and yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
we were warned. It was about
Gothic,
cannibals. I mean,
Gothic,
come on.
yes. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So this next poem that I'm going to read is called Green Ink, and I was actually thinking before I, decided to settle on the name Inhale Exile. I was thinking of calling it Green Ink, and I didn't realize the the kind of green ink is really considered something kind of quite good. The color green is quite good in Iraq and the Middle East. A lot of people use green ink, but apparently it means something different here. I've been told that it means that well, if you use green ink, you often write complaint letters. Apparently, I didn't know that before, and also you might be part of the MI5, which I didn't know either. But anyway, thankfully I was warned about the possible connotations, so I didn't call it green ink. But this is about my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, and he used to write in green ink. Green ink. The thin man in the three-piece suit is the only one who waits in a queue. Nobody else cares to take turns. He comes each year to register deferred entry for his daughter at Baghdad University, clings to the hope that dust can settle, things will get better, and his daughter and her husband can return. He writes her name, signs in green ink. At home, he settles into his fixing position, crouched in his white dishdasha, glasses to the tip of his nose. He fixes irons and kettles, listens to the news on the radio. At war with brothers in Iran now. He smokes as he worries. Always wartime, it seems. His daughter in England savors each airmail letter, the smell of spent matches, deep inhale of green ink to capture his scent until he visits. It's been years. She kisses his hands as he gets off the coach from Heathrow. Kerosene suitcase full of hand-woven loofahs, date syrup, bricks of olive and bay leaf soap, the glass cups and saucers her mother sent. Black tea as he likes it, heaped sugar, a slice of lemon. He pours it into the saucer to let it cool and sips. Between visits and sips, hairs grey and wars end and begin. Saddam invades Kuwait. No contact as the bombs rain on Basra and Baghdad. Saddam takes revenge on rebels. Stories in parts. She hears he's passed and mourns her father though he lives. 6 months. She doesn't know until crossed lines transmit the echo of his voice. Soon, the same unsettled dust blocks his coronary arteries. His fountain pen dries. His pocket watch stops telling time. Exhale. A portrait of Saddam facing his hospital bed. So I mentioned before about Halabja, and it was a very iconic photo, actually, the photo that was circulated worldwide. And they did a statue of that photo, and it's in Halabja now. So there are many iconic photos, especially I used to watch more news, I think, than was healthy for a teenager. Because when I was a teenager, Saddam invaded Kuwait, and my family was all in, my extended family all in Iraq, and we didn't have any news. So we were just watching the news all the time. And then the next time with in 2003 with the invasion of Iraq again, and so many iconic photos. And one of them that really struck me was actually not so much a photo, although it was on the newspapers later, but when they actually captured Saddam. And for growing up kind of fearing this figure that had affected my life indirectly in so many ways, and just seeing him like that with disheveled hair, I remember actually weeping, because I couldn't quite believe it, but also I feared what was going to come. So this is just the first part of a 4-part poem, and it's called Video Capture. So video capture. After 8 months on the run, Saddam Hussein, former president of Iraq, was captured on the 14th of December 2003. 1. Ace of spades found in a hole 6 feet deep, 8 feet wide. A muddy orange grove close to the Tigris, headquarters for the latest assassinations and car bombs. Iftah famak, they say. Saddam opens his mouth as they search his hair, beard, and molars for weapons of mass destruction. Okay, this last poem that I'm going to read now is it's part of a series of poems related to an event that happened on the 3rd of July 2016, and the first poem that I in the series of poems about this event was actually, before it was redacted, I redacted a lot of it, but the original poem was the first poem that I'd written of the book. So basically, a few minutes after midnight, a suicide truck bomb targeted the El Hadi shopping mall in the Karada district of Baghdad. It was busy with families shopping for the end of Ramadan, and over 340 civilians were killed and hundreds were injured. And one of the victims, unfortunately, was a young family member. He was 14. So this is called Portrait Artist, and it's referring to the aftermath. She draws the same photo through strokes of charcoal, strengthens lines to hold him close. Sketching mistakes are easier to erase, yet she still can't get a true likeness. The soul who took every room with her and left each chamber of her heart empty. Just like when his mobile ringtone became the means to find him and his friends, it is as if he knew how this photograph would be used 3 weeks shy of his 15th birthday. He wears a black t-shirt, his fringe flipped to the left, the lighter part of his hair spiked up. He looks past the camera, gives a suitably solemn smile for the image to accompany the poems and eulogies in each room. The blue and green balloons behind him have been obscured since that day by black banners and white prayers. She knows she'll always feel the heavy waves as she tries to capture his eyes, the curves of his face. She draws a portrait of shadows and shapes of carbon in a landscape now without color. Even without the photo, she sees his face at every turn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabia.
Okay, so yeah, that image you're seeing is of Spring-Heeled Jack. And Spring-Heeled Jack appears in a number of poems throughout A Voice Coming From Them. He's a Victorian urban legend first sighted in 1837. And he has the appearance of a demon with clawed hands, fiery eyes, and the ability to leap great distances and heights. Also for me, he's come to represent that kind of unknown part of myself, which enabled me to survive my suicide attempt. So this poem is called Night Clubbing with Spring-Heeled Jack. Here I am on the wrong side of the velvet rope. Push past, purrs Spring-Heeled Jack. Here at the bar, and you people to know. Be a bitch, grins Spring-Heeled Jack. Here I am, too cool to dance. Quite right, nods Spring-Heeled Jack. Here is the man who let you in free. More drinks, shrieks Spring-Heeled Jack. And here is a man who smiles. Drink more, roars Spring-Heeled Jack, and I slap the base of the man's pint and, oop, leaps, smirks spring-heeled Jack, and we howl as beer splatters his face, and leg it, yells spring-heeled Jack. Here is what leaps beneath my skin. Here is how we terrify. So the next poem was inspired by Richard Davis, an artist who was born in Cardiff in 1945. At 15, he left home and travelled the world before settling in Paris in 1968, where he died in 1991. Behind me, you can see the print that the poem is based on. The italic quotations in the poem are based on translations from an article about him and his work, published in issue 42 of the Chronique de la Bibliothèque Nationale de France. I've also realised that the poem is equally about my father, who died last year, and so it is now dedicated to him as well. This is Tobias and the Angel, 1989 to 90. For Richard Davis and for Ian Dixon. Struck in 1986 by the first attacks of the HIV virus, Davis worked more intensely, more and more. You were dead 2 years before we encounter the Musée d'Art Moderne de Troyes, examining your shadowed prints of angels and men, where the angel and the man do not fight. I see my engravings as poems. Like a teenager, unnerved and without language to ask, my father secretly buys a poster for me. The angel is towering, but smiling. Tobias is lost in the clouds of his embrace. This has lived with me through every house, every mistake. I am staring at you now, more intensely, more and more. One thing that a lot of people who've suffered bullying in their lives find is it's very difficult to actually stand up for other people. You don't want to put your head above the parapet in case you draw attention to yourself and attract that violence. So this is a poem that I've written for myself, really, to remind me of a strategy of how to cope with that. The poem's called I'm Learning to Shout Oi, and it's for Travis Alabanza and for Christine Cherry. I'm learning to shout oi, right to the back of the school bus, to all those bastards gobbing at me every day through straws. I'm learning to shout oi to that car full of jocks, throwing a bucket of KFC bones towards my fabulous friend. I'm learning to shout oi. I am never kicking your football back. I'm learning to shout oi, so loud your words are Jerichoed. I'm learning to shout oi, to stop you mid-pounce. Oi, yes, we're holding hands in public. Oi, stay 6 foot away from me. Oi, let them breathe. Oi as commandment, oi as support, because who stands down for an excuse me? I'm learning to shout oi inside to myself. And then the last poem I'm going to read tonight, it's one of the last poems in a voice coming from men as well. It's kind of about what might have possibly been. Poem's called I Am. No release of balloons at dawn for me. No room left just as it was for me. No sewing my name on a quilt for me. No annual tears to spill for me. No keeping old shirts that smell of me. No video montages to play of me. No organising a forest search for me. No ambiguous goodbyes from me. No hideous surprise to find from me. No thinking of what to have said to me. No what ifs and could haves as all that remains of me. Never a confessional wrote by me. Best to acknowledge the luck of me. Except I hold all those lost with me. Those who survive left to cope are me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to all of our poets. Okay, any other questions? What do you each hope for your book? Jeremy, since you're up still, why don't you answer? Start off with.
Well, firstly, just like Angela and Beer, it's just the most amazing feeling to be shortlisted. And so thankful to the judges and Literature Wales. For me, it feels like a second launch for the book. So, you know, we kind of launched in just coming out of the pandemic. Everything wasn't a great time. And I just feel having being shortlisted for the book just gives it another chance for it to get out there and for people to read it, and that's what I'm hoping most for. And yeah, it's just such a great feeling.
Yeah, I think yeah, I second everything Jeremy says. Certainly, the shortlisting has, I hope allowed more people to come across it and read it. And really, I hope, and I think it's probably the same for many, but to kind of increase understanding. I mean, for the when I was writing the book, I just wanted to kind of celebrate and amplify voices that aren't normally heard, and and I hope that can continue and move forward and just increase understanding with everyone, to see beyond the numbers and the statistics.
Well, like every writer, you hope to be read. Failing that, I'd like a great big opera with a huge scene with shipwrecks and people rushing on and whales and sharks and the whole lot. Failing that, just people to read it. That's about it, really, isn't it?
I think we should turn all of the books, every book, into an opera. I think this is
Yes.
the epitome of what should happen to a book.
Thank you to my fellow poets. I really enjoyed your readings. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, so if there's no further questions from the audience, I guess that's us done.
And again, beautiful readings from my fellow shortlistees.
Yeah, and we find out on the 29th.
Yeah.
At which point we stop being friends, maybe.
No.
Doesn't work like that, does it? Okay. Thank you, everybody. That's absolutely wonderful to see you all. So congratulations, everybody, on your shortlisting. Thank you very much, Literature Wales, for having such an amazing taste. And we'll find out on the 29th. Okay, thank you, everybody.
So 4, 3, 2, 1, smile.